Sophie Bennett stood outside the towering glass building of Sterling Media Group, her worn leather portfolio clutched against her chest. The Boston skyline stretched behind the structure, all gleaming steel and endless ambition. At 23, Sophie had traveled 8 hours by bus from her tiny Vermont hometown of Maple Ridge, where her grandmother Rose was waiting for news. Good news? News that could change everything? She smoothed down her navy dress. It's the nicest thing she owned, purchased from a clearance rack 3 years ago. Her reflection in the glass doors showed a young woman with hopeful green eyes and chestnut hair pulled into a simple bun. Sophie took a deep breath and pushed through the entrance. The cold welcome the lobby was all marble floors and modern art, the kind of place that whispered money with every polished surface. Sophie approached the reception desk, her heart hammering against her ribs. A woman with perfectly manicured nails barely glanced up from her computer screen. "I have an interview at 10, Sophie said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Sophie Bennett for the marketing coordinator position." The receptionist's eyes traveled from Sophie's face down to her shoes and back up again, a slight smirk playing at her lips. 15th floor. Conference room B. Sophie thanked her and headed to the elevators, unaware that she was being watched from the security cameras by someone who recognized her face from a single photograph. Taken months ago, face to face with Cruelty. Conference room B was intimidating in its simplicity. A massive table stretched across the space, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than Sophie's entire wardrobe. 3 people sat waiting, but it was the woman in the center who commanded attention. Rachel Stone was everything Sophie was not. 40 years old, with sharp features, designer clothes, and an expression that suggested she smelled something unpleasant. Her perfectly highlighted hair framed a face that had forgotten how to smile with genuine warmth. "Miss Bennett," Rachel said, not bothering to stand or extend a hand. "Please, sit." Sophie settled into the chair across from them, placing her portfolio on the table. She had prepared for this moment, practiced her answers, researched the company until she could recite their mission statement in her sleep. So Rachel began, leaning back with crossed arms. "You traveled from Maple Ridge. That is quite the journey from nowhere to somewhere." The other 2 interviewers, both younger men, shifted uncomfortably. Sophie kept her smile in place. "Yes, it is about a 3-hour drive to the bus station, then a 5-hour ride. But I believe the opportunity here is worth the distance." Rachel's laugh was sharp and brittle. The opportunity. How charming. She flipped open Sophie's resume with one manicured finger. "State college? No internships at major firms? No connections in the industry? Tell me, what exactly made you think you belonged here?" The weight of words, Sophie felt heat rise to her cheeks, but maintained her composure. "I graduated top of my class with a focus on digital marketing strategies. My senior thesis on social media engagement was selected for publication in the Northeast Marketing Journal. I may not have big-name internships, but I have practical skills and fresh perspectives." "Fresh perspectives," Rachel repeated, her tone dripping with mockery. She turned to her colleagues. "Did you hear that, gentlemen? Fresh perspectives from someone who probably just got internet in her town last year?" The men looked away, clearly uncomfortable, but unwilling to challenge their superior. Sophie's hands clenched in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. She thought of Grandmother Rose, of the medical bills stacked on their kitchen table, of the promise she had made. "I understand I come from a small town," Sophie said, her voice quiet but firm. "But that does not mean I lack ambition or capability. Some of the most innovative ideas come from people who see the world differently." The performance of power. Rachel stood, walking slowly around the table like a predator circling prey. "Let me tell you something about this industry, sweetie. It eats girls like you for breakfast. You come in here with your thrift store dress and your small-town dreams, thinking hard work matters. But it does not. Connections matter. Pedigree matters. You know what you are? A waste of my time." Sophie's throat tightened, but she refused to let tears form. She had faced harder things than this woman's cruelty. She had watched her grandmother collapse from exhaustion after double shifts at the diner. She had signed papers that bound her to a stranger in marriage, all for money to save the only family she had left. "I appreciate your honesty," Sophie managed, standing as well. Though I disagree with your assessment. Thank you for your time. We are not done, Rachel said, a cruel smile spreading across her face. I want you to know exactly why you will never work here. Look at you. Your shoes are scuffed. Your dress is off the rack from who knows where. You carry yourself like someone apologizing for existing. Sterling Media Group represents excellence. We cannot have someone like you representing our brand. Silent dignity. The words hit like physical blows, each one designed to cut deep. Sophie gathered her portfolio, her hands trembling slightly. She met Rachel's gaze with as much strength as she could summon.
Oh.
I hope you never find yourself in a position where someone judges your worth based on circumstances beyond your control. Sophie said softly, because that kind of cruelty says far more about the person delivering it than the person receiving it. She walked out of that conference room with her head high, though inside her heart was breaking. The elevator ride down felt eternal, each floor a reminder of how far she had fallen short. She had been so certain this was her chance. Her opportunity to prove that small-town girls could make it in the big city, the truth behind everything outside. Sophie found a bench in a small park across from Sterling Media Group. She pulled out her phone, staring at the screen. There was one message, from a number she knew by heart now. How did the interview go? It was from him. Her husband? The man she had never met, whose face she had never seen, whose real name she barely believed was real. Thomas Hunt. The marriage had been arranged through a lawyer 6 months ago. She needed money for grandmother Rose's heart surgery. He needed a wife on paper for reasons he never fully explained. No meetings, no expectations beyond legal signatures. Just a business transaction that gave her $100,000 and gave him whatever mysterious benefit he required. Sophie typed back with shaking fingers. It was terrible. They made me feel like nothing. But I survived it. His response came quickly. You are not nothing. Never let anyone make you believe that. There will be other opportunities. She smiled sadly at the screen. This stranger, this mysterious husband who existed only in text messages, had shown her more kindness in 6 months than Rachel Stone had in 30 minutes. What Sophie did not know was that Thomas Hunt was sitting in his private office on the 20th floor of that very building, watching her through the window, his jaw clenched with fury at what he had witnessed. Through the security feed. What she did not know was that Rachel Stone had just made the biggest mistake of her career. What she did not know was that her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. The game was just beginning. Sophie Bennett sat in a sterile lawyer's office in Burlington, Vermont, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The room smelled of old books and desperation. Across from her, a gray-haired attorney named Mr. Phillips slid a thick stack of papers across his mahogany desk. This is highly unusual, Mr. Phillips said, his voice careful and measured. But everything is legal and binding. You understand the terms, Miss Bennett? Sophie nodded, though her stomach churned with uncertainty. Behind her, grandmother Rose lay in a hospital bed 30 miles away, her heart failing a little more each day. The surgery cost $100,000. Money Sophie would never see in her lifetime working at the Maple Ridge Diner. 1 year of legal marriage, Sophie repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. No physical contact required. No public appearances together. Complete anonymity. After 12 months, divorce papers will be filed. I received the full payment up front for medical expenses. Correct, Mr. Phillips confirmed. Your husband will maintain his privacy. You will maintain yours. Communication, if necessary, will be through a secure messaging system. No phone calls. No video chats. No in-person meetings. Sophie picked up the pen, her hand trembling. Why would someone agree to this? The lawyer adjusted his glasses. That information is confidential. But I assure you, Miss Bennett, this gentleman has his reasons. Reasons that harm no one and benefit you greatly. She thought of grandmother Rose, who had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when Sophie was 7. Rose, who worked herself to exhaustion to put Sophie through college. Rose, who deserved to live. Sophie signed her name on the dotted line, The mystery husband 3 hours after signing those papers. Sophie received her first message from an unknown number. The text was brief and businesslike. The money has been transferred to your account. Use it wisely. I hope your grandmother recovers fully. We will not speak unless necessary. Sophie stared at the message, her heart pounding. She checked her banking app and nearly dropped her phone. $100,000 sat in her account, real and solid, and impossibly life-changing. She typed back carefully. Thank you. I will never be able to repay this kindness. His response came minutes later. No repayment necessary. This arrangement benefits us both. Take care of your family. Over the following months, something unexpected happened. The man who was technically her husband began sending occasional messages. Nothing personal at first, just brief check-ins. How is your grandmother? Did the surgery go well? Are you managing okay? Sophie found herself responding with more than just facts. She told him about grandmother Rose's slow recovery, about her own struggles to find work beyond the diner, about her dreams of working in marketing and making something of herself. He listened, or rather, he read, and he responded with an understanding that surprised her. Dreams are worth pursuing, he wrote one night. Never let circumstances define your limits. It's easy to say when you have money, Sophie replied, then immediately regretted her sharp tone. His response was gentle. Money solves some problems, but creates others. Loneliness, for instance. The inability to trust anyone's motives, the weight of expectations you never asked for. That message shifted something between them. He was not just a faceless benefactor anymore. He was a person, lonely and complicated, hiding behind the same anonymity she was. The growing connection as months passed. Their messages became more frequent and more personal. Sophie learned that her husband loved old jazz music and despised pretentious business dinners. He learned that she could quote entire passages from her favorite novels and made the world's best apple pie according to everyone in Maple Ridge. What made you agree to this arrangement? She finally asked one evening, 4 months into their paper marriage. His response took longer than usual. Family obligations. Expectations I cannot escape. Sometimes the easiest way to satisfy demands is to meet them technically, while maintaining your own path, Sophie understood. She had felt those pressures herself, the weight of being the good granddaughter, the responsible one, the girl who never complained about her circumstances. Do you ever wish things were different? She typed. Every day, he replied, but wishing changes nothing. Action does. It was his messages that convinced Sophie to apply for the position at Sterling Media Group. He had mentioned casually that Boston offered opportunities Vermont could not. He never pushed, never demanded. Just planted seeds of possibility. There is a world beyond Maple Ridge, he wrote. You deserve to see it, so Sophie applied. Practiced her interview answers, borrowed money from Rose for a bus ticket, and traveled to Boston with hope burning bright in her chest. The night before the interview, the evening before her Sterling Media Group interview, Sophie sat in a cheap motel room outside Boston, staring at her phone. She had sent him a message hours ago telling him about the interview, but he had not responded. Unusual for him. Finally, near midnight, his message arrived. I have faith in you. Show them who you are. Do not let anyone diminish your worth. Sophie smiled at the screen, typing back, what if I fail? Then you try again. Failure is only permanent if you stop trying. She fell asleep with her phone clutched in her hand, comforted by words from a man whose face she had never seen, whose voice she had never heard, whose real life remained a complete mystery. What Sophie did not know was that Thomas Hunt had spent that evening watching security footage of Sterling Media Group, ensuring everything was in place for her interview. He sat in his penthouse office, his own phone in hand, staring at her messages with an expression that mixed longing with resignation. Thomas Hunt was 32 years old, the CEO of Hunt Industries, a technology and media conglomerate that owned 17 companies, including Sterling Media Group. He was wealthy beyond measure, handsome in the sharp-featured way of men who spent too much time working, and utterly isolated by his success, his father, Richard Hunt. had demanded Thomas marry before his 33rd birthday or lose his position as CEO to his ruthless cousin, Gerald. The family board supported this archaic requirement. Believing married men made more stable leaders, Thomas refused to marry for show, to parade some socialite around as a trophy wife. So he found another way: a legal marriage to someone who wanted nothing from him except money for a worthy cause. Someone who would remain anonymous, separate, free from the poisonous world of wealth and power he had chosen. Sophie Bennett from dozens of candidates because something in her application letter touched him. She wrote about love and sacrifice and family with a sincerity that felt genuine in a world of manufactured emotions. He never intended to care about her, but her messages, her struggles, her honest dreams, they worked their way past his defenses. Now, months later, he found himself thinking about her constantly, wondering what she looked like beyond the single photograph the lawyer had provided, imagining conversations they might have if circumstances were different. The day of. Reckoning when Thomas watched the security footage of Rachel Stone tearing Sophie apart during that interview. Something inside him snapped. He had built his fortune on recognizing talent others overlooked. Sophie's resume was impressive, despite her lack of connections. Her interview answers, before Rachel derailed everything, showed intelligence and creativity, but more than that. Rachel had attacked someone Thomas had come to care about deeply. Even if Sophie did not know they were connected beyond anonymous messages, he made a call to his head of human resources. "I want a complete review of Rachel Stone's hiring practices. Every candidate she has rejected in the past year, every interview she has conducted, and I want it on my desk by tomorrow morning." His assistant, Jennifer Park, a sharp woman in her 50s who had worked for Thomas since he took over the company, raised an eyebrow. "Specific reason, sir?" "She is hurting this company by rejecting qualified candidates based on personal bias," Thomas said coldly. "That ends now." He sent Sophie a message, keeping his tone supportive but distant. He could not reveal himself yet. The situation was too complicated, too fragile, but he could help her in other ways. The unexpected offer 2 days after her disastrous interview. Sophie received an email from a company called Hartwell Digital, a mid-sized marketing firm in Boston. They had received her resume through a professional networking site and wanted to interview her for a junior marketing specialist position. Sophie's hand shook as she read the email. Another chance. Another opportunity to prove herself. She messaged her husband immediately. "I got another interview request. Boston firm. Marketing position. I am scared to hope again." His response was instant. "Hope anyway. Fear is natural, but do not let it control you. You have everything they need. Show them." The interview at Hartwell Digital was everything Sterling Media Group was not. The team was warm and welcoming. They asked about her ideas, listened to her answers, and treated her like a professional rather than an intruder. When they offered her the position at the end of the interview, Sophie actually cried. "You believe in potential here," the hiring manager, David Chen, said kindly. "Your academic record and your passion for the work speak volumes. When can you start?" Sophie accepted on the spot, her heart soaring with relief and joy. She would need to find an apartment in Boston, leave Maple Ridge behind, start a completely new life. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. That night, she sent her husband a long message detailing everything. He responded with genuine warmth. "I am proud of you. You earned this through your own merit. Never forget that." "I wish I could thank you in person," Sophie typed. "For everything you have done for me." His response came slowly, as if he had written and rewritten it several times. "Perhaps someday. But for now, focus on your new beginning. You have worked hard for this moment. Enjoy it." The twist of fate. What Sophie did not know was that Hartwell Digital had just been acquired by Hunt Industries the previous month. Thomas had not arranged her interview. That truly was coincidence. But he had ensured David Chen knew to give serious consideration to all candidates, regardless of their backgrounds. What Sophie also did not know was that in 3 weeks, Thomas Hunt would be visiting the Hartwell Digital offices for a routine inspection of his newest acquisition. What neither of them knew was that Rachel Stone, in a desperate attempt to save her own position after Thomas began investigating her practices, would show up at Hartwell Digital claiming Sophie had stolen proprietary information during her Sterling Media Group interview. The collision course was set. The truth would come out. And everything both Sophie and Thomas had carefully constructed would come crashing down in the most unexpected way possible. Sophie fell asleep that night in her new Boston apartment, a tiny studio that cost more per month than her entire house in Maple Ridge. Feeling hopeful for the first time in years, Thomas sat in his penthouse, staring at her messages, knowing he should stop this before feelings became too complicated to untangle. But he could not stop. He did not want to stop. She had become the brightest part of his carefully controlled existence, and the thought of losing that connection terrified him more than any business deal ever had. The secret could not last forever, but for now, in the safety of anonymous messages and unspoken feelings, two lonely people had found something precious. Neither was ready to let it go. Sophie's life in Boston bloomed like flowers after a long winter. Her work at Hartwell Digital challenged her in the best ways possible. David Chen proved to be a patient mentor, guiding her through projects while encouraging her unique perspectives. Her colleagues were friendly, welcoming her despite her small-town background. Every evening, she messaged her husband about her day. He had become her anchor, the one constant in this sea of change. His responses were thoughtful and encouraging, celebrating her victories and comforting her through doubts. "I created my first full campaign today," she texted one Wednesday night. "They actually used my ideas. All of them." "Of course they did," he replied. "Talent always rises." "How does it feel?" Sophie smiled at her phone screen. "Like maybe I actually belong here." "You do." Never question that again. She wondered about him constantly now. Who was this man who had saved her grandmother's life, who listened to her dreams, who celebrated her successes like they were his own? Sometimes she imagined meeting him, but the thought felt both thrilling and terrifying. What if reality could not match the connection they had built through words alone? "Do you ever think about meeting?" She typed one night, her heart pounding as she hit send. His response took several minutes. "Every day. But I worry the reality would disappoint us both." "I do not think it would," Sophie wrote back. "I think I know you better than I have known most people I have met face to face." "Perhaps you are right," he replied. "Perhaps someday soon." Sophie did not know that Thomas was sitting in his office at that very moment, staring at her words, his finger hovering over his phone. He wanted to tell her everything. Who he was, why he had chosen this arrangement, how she had become so much more than a convenient solution to a family problem. But fear held him back. Feared that she would see him as just another wealthy man trying to control her life. Feared that the genuine connection they shared would shatter under the weight of his complicated reality. The storm arrives Friday morning started like any other. Sophie arrived at Hartwell Digital with coffee and a smile, ready to present her latest project to the team. But the office atmosphere felt wrong. People whispered in corners. David Chen looked stressed, his usual calm demeanor replaced with tension. "Conference room," he said quietly to Sophie. "Now we have a situation." Sophie's stomach dropped as she followed him. Inside the conference room sat two people she had never seen before, and one she recognized immediately. Rachel Stone, from Sterling Media Group, sat with her arms crossed, a triumphant smirk on her face. "Miss Bennett," David began, his voice careful. "There have been allegations that you stole confidential information from Sterling Media Group during your interview there?" Sophie felt the blood drain from her face. "What? That is absolutely not true." Rachel leaned forward, her eyes glittering with malice. "You were in our conference room for 45 minutes. Security footage shows you photographing documents on the table." "I never photographed anything," Sophie protested, her voice rising with panic. "I barely touched anything except my own portfolio." One of the strangers, a stern woman in an expensive suit, spoke up. "Miss Stone has provided what appears to be photographic evidence. If true, this is industrial espionage. Hartwell Digital could face serious legal consequences for employing you." David looked at Sophie, conflict clear in his expression. "Sophie, I want to believe you." But these are serious allegations. They are lies, Sophie said desperately. She humiliated me in that interview. She mocked everything about me. Why would I steal anything from a place that treated me like garbage? Rachel's smile widened. Perhaps revenge? Small-town girl rejected by the big city decides to strike back. Sophie felt tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I need to call someone. Just give me 5 minutes. She stepped out of the conference room and dialed the one person who always believed in her. Her husband. He answered on the first ring, his voice for the first time, deep and concerned. Sophie, what is wrong? Hearing his actual voice shocked her into momentary silence. It was rich and warm, with an authority that suggested someone used to being listened to. They are accusing me of stealing information, she said, her voice breaking. The woman from my failed interview, she showed up at my work with false evidence. I do not know what to do. Where are you? He asked, his tone sharp now. Hartwell Digital. Conference room B, please. I know we agreed never to meet, but I need help. I need someone who believes me. I am coming, he said. Do not agree to anything until I get there. 15 minutes. The line went dead. Sophie stared at her phone, her heart racing. He was coming, after 6 months of anonymous messages. She was finally going to meet her husband. The truth walks in Sophie returned to the conference room. Her hands clasped together to stop their shaking. Rachel was speaking with false concern about protecting the industry from unethical practices. David looked increasingly uncomfortable with the whole situation. Then the door opened. Thomas Hunt walked in. The entire room fell silent. He was tall and commanding in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Sophie's monthly rent. Dark hair, sharp jawline, and eyes that swept the room with calculated assessment. But it was the authority he carried that truly dominated the space. This was a man accustomed to control, to power, to getting exactly what he wanted. Rachel Stone went pale. Mr. Hunt, I did not realize you were involved in this matter, Miss Stone, Thomas said, his voice cold enough to freeze fire. I am involved in everything that happens in my companies. Did you not know that Hunt Industries acquired Hartwell Digital last month? Sophie's mind spun. Hunt Industries. Thomas Hunt. Her husband owned this company. Her husband owned the company that owned Sterling Media Group. Her husband was not just wealthy, he was one of the most powerful business figures in New England. Thomas turned to her, his expression softening just slightly. Miss Bennett, I apologize for the distress this has caused you. Their eyes met, and Sophie saw recognition there. He knew exactly who she was. He had known all along. You, she whispered. Me, he confirmed quietly. Rachel tried to regain control of the situation. Mr. Hunt, with all due respect, the evidence clearly shows that Miss Bennett photographed confidential documents during her Sterling Media interview. Thomas finally looked at Rachel, and his expression turned glacial. Show me this evidence. Rachel fumbled with her tablet, pulling up photographs. Thomas examined them with a critical eye, then smiled, though there was no warmth in it. These are interesting, he said, because the documents shown in these photographs were created 2 weeks ago. Miss Bennett's interview was 3 weeks ago. The metadata on these images shows they were taken yesterday in your office. Miss Stone, you fabricated this evidence. Rachel's face went from pale to red. I did not fabricate anything. Someone must have altered the metadata. Thomas pulled out his own phone, tapping through screens. I have the complete security footage from Miss Bennett's interview. 45 minutes of you berating her for her background, mocking her education, and rejecting her without even reviewing her qualifications properly. At no point did she touch any documents or use her phone. Would you like me to play it for everyone here? The room fell into stunned silence. David Chen's eyes widened. The stern woman in the expensive suit looked between Rachel and Thomas with growing understanding. This is a personal vendetta, Thomas continued, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. You rejected a qualified candidate based on classist prejudices, and when she found success elsewhere, you attempted to destroy her career. That ends now. Rachel stood abruptly. You cannot prove any of this. It is her word against mine. No, Thomas said calmly. It is documented evidence against your fabricated lies. You are terminated from Sterling Media Group effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. Miss Bennett will be consulting with our legal team about a defamation lawsuit. Rachel's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You are firing me over some nobody from nowhere. I am firing you for cause, Thomas corrected. For creating a hostile work environment, for discrimination in hiring practices, and for attempting to frame an innocent employee with false evidence. Your actions reflect poorly on every company under the Hunt Industries umbrella. You are done here. Security appeared at the door as if summoned by magic. Rachel shot Sophie a look of pure hatred before being escorted out, her career crumbling around her. After she left, Thomas turned to the others in the room. This meeting is concluded. Ms. Bennett is completely cleared of all allegations. David ensured this incident is documented properly. Ms. Bennett should receive a formal apology from Sterling Media Group. The room cleared quickly, leaving Sophie and Thomas alone. Stared at him, her mind trying to process everything that had just happened. You are my husband, she said finally. You have been my husband for 6 months. Yes, Thomas confirmed, moving closer but maintaining a respectful distance. I apologize for the deception. Deception? Sophie's voice rose slightly. Let me pour my heart out to you about my job search, my interview. You knew the whole time what happened because you owned the company where it happened. Thomas had the grace to look uncomfortable. I know how this appears, but when we made our arrangement, anonymity was part of the agreement. I never intended for feelings to develop. For either of us, feelings, Sophie repeated, her heart hammering. You have feelings? He met her gaze directly, and she saw vulnerability there that seemed impossible in someone so powerful. I have spent 6 months getting to know the most genuine, kind, and determined person I have ever encountered. Yes, Sophie, I have feelings. Deep ones that terrify me, because I do not know how to navigate them. Sophie sank into a chair, overwhelmed. Why did you really need a wife? You could have anyone. Tom sat across from her, his commanding presence softening. My father's will requires me to be married before my 33rd birthday or lose control of Hunt Industries to my cousin, would destroy everything my grandfather built, refused to marry someone from my social circle, someone who wanted me for money or status. I wanted something real, even if it had to start as something fake. So you picked me because I needed money and would disappear after a year, Sophie said, understanding dawning. I picked you because your letter to the lawyer was honest, Thomas said quietly. You wrote about sacrifice and love and family without any artifice. In my world, that kind of genuineness is impossible to find. I thought a business arrangement would be clean and simple. I did not expect you to become the person I most want to talk to every day. Sophie's mind raced through 6 months of messages, of late-night conversations, of shared dreams and fears. She thought about the man who had celebrated her victories and comforted her defeats. That man and this powerful CEO were the same person. I do not know how to feel about this, she admitted. You saved my grandmother. You helped me without ever asking for anything in return. But you also lied about who you were. I know, Thomas said. I understand if you want to proceed with the divorce as planned. I will honor our agreement regardless of my personal feelings. Sophie looked at him, really looked at him. Beneath the expensive suit and the commanding presence, she saw the lonely man who had written to her about the weight of expectations. She saw someone who had protected her today with fierce determination. She saw a possibility. I do not want a divorce, she said slowly. But I also do not want whatever this is to stay the way it was. No more anonymity, no more secrets. Thomas's expression shifted, hope breaking through his careful control. What do you want? I want to actually know my husband, Sophie said. I want real dates and real conversations, not just text messages. I want to see if what we built through words can exist in reality. And if it cannot, Thomas asked, though his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. Sophie smiled, feeling brave for the first time since this morning's nightmare began. Then at least we will know we tried. But I think it can. I think maybe we already know each other better than most married couples ever do. Thomas stood and extended his hand, formal, but his eyes warm. Then let me properly introduce myself. Thomas Hunt, workaholic CEO, jazz music enthusiast, and apparently your husband. Sophie took his hand, feeling the warmth of real contact after months of digital distance. Sophie Bennett, small-town dreamer, marketing professional, and apparently married to a man who just destroyed my enemy with receipts and security footage. They both laughed, the tension finally breaking. It was strange and unexpected and completely imperfect, but it was real. "Can I take you to dinner?" Thomas asked. "An actual date with my actual wife?" "Only if you promise not to take me somewhere to fancy," Sophie said. "I only have one nice dress, and you have already seen it." Thomas smiled, genuine and unguarded, for perhaps the first time in years. "How about pizza? I know a place in the North End. Nothing fancy, just the best margarita in Boston." "Perfect," Sophie agreed, as they left the conference room together. Sophie pulled out her phone and sent a message to Grandmother Rose. "You will not believe what just happened. I will call tonight and tell you everything. But the short version is, my fake husband turned out to be real after all." Thomas glanced at her phone and raised an eyebrow. "Does Rose know about our arrangement?" "She knows everything," Sophie said. "She is the only one who does. She told me months ago that any man willing to save a stranger's grandmother was worth keeping. I guess she was right." "I look forward to meeting her properly," Thomas said. "If she approves, she will love you," Sophie assured him. "Especially after you destroyed Rachel's stone with such style. Rose appreciates dramatic justice." They walked out of Hartwell Digital together into the bright Boston afternoon. Two people who had accidentally found something real in the most unlikely circumstances. Rachel Stone's career was over, her cruelty finally catching up with her. Sophie's real life was just beginning, no longer defined by circumstances or limitations, and Thomas had found what he never expected. Someone who loved him for the person he was in text messages. Before she ever knew about the power and the money, sometimes the best love stories start with a contract and end with a choice. The choice to be brave, to be honest, and to see where real connection might lead. Their story was just beginning, and it would be extraordinary.